So the title, what we're trying to try and touch on today is innovation sovereignty. I think, as everyone in the room knows, this is a particular interest to Canada. We heard Prime Minister Mark Carney talking about the power of the middle powers, and I think really some items that have happened worldwide that have been incredibly disruptive, not only to populations but as we watch science. So we're gonna explore 4 themes through that, and I'm gonna ask the panel here for their inputs on what they might do. We are the first panel, so we are the troubleshooting panel, and I'm gonna ask everyone to have a little bit of leeway with us. I'm actually gonna join the panel sitting down, and I look forward to the discussion. There will be some audience participation through Menti, I hope. Sebastian and CFI have set that up. If not, we'll raise hands or something and really try and gather from the facilities that are able to make it. I heard ONC was not able to make it due to some flight disruptions. Input from what you guys feel is the role of us moving forward, or the important role of us moving forward. Now, is this one on? Okay, awesome. What a handsome group of people. And I did find out that if you have your photographer take enough pictures, one of them will actually not look like you and be more attractive than you are in person. So what I thought we'd do is each one of the panelists is going to get about 2 minutes to talk about their facility, but more importantly, the background of their facility with respect to how they've received MSI funding, the amount of MSI funding, because one of the things we have here across the panel is 2 fairly large facilities and 2 smaller facilities from a funding perspective. So I will start this way and move across. So Alex?
Yes, thank you, Paul. So hopefully you hear me well. So I'm Alex Porres, the Executive Director of Amundsen Science. And actually, we're managing the scientific research icebreaker Amundsen. So let's break the ice. So I'm the first to speak this morning. So it's really natural for me to do that kind of breaking the ice. So Amundsen Science is a not-for-profit corporation hosted at Université Laval in Quebec City. And through a team of about 20 persons, we manage a scientific mandate of this ship, the research icebreaker Amundsen, which is actually the ship on your $50 bill. The Amundsen is a medium-class icebreaker of the Canadian Coast Guard, which has been built in 1979, underwent a scientific retrofit in 2003, following an earlier decommissioning by the Government of Canada. The retrofit of 2003 was made possible by a $28 million grant of the CFI, which was called at the time the International Joint Venture Fund, and also investments from DFO and Coast Guard. For about a decade, the Amundsen has been managed, the scientific mandate managed by ArcticNet, the Centers of Excellence, Networks of Excellence, propulsing really Canada as the leading edge in terms of international Arctic research. In 2014, the Amundsen entered the MSI family for the first time, and Amundsen Science was created the year after to manage really the facility from an independent and transparent approach. So it won't be actually linked to any user programs because ArcticNet back in the days was the main user of the ship. So we were renewed for 6 years from 2017 to 2023. And then for another 6 years, now 7, thanks to the CFI. And we were recently targeted also to migrate to the MRF framework as part of phase 1. Today, we receive about 10 million from the MSI fund annually, which represents 60% of our OM&M fund. The remaining 40% is coming from user fees and in-kind contributions from the Coast Guard and many partners. And just a final note, we do not rely on any provincial fund for our activities.
Very much, Alex. We're going to skip one, I guess, and we'll go to Elizabeth first.
Bonjour tout le monde, je m'appelle Elisabeth Nanac, je suis la PDG de Gliconet. Donc, je suis là pour représenter les services intégrés de Gliconet et donc qui font partie de Gliconet, qui est un réseau scientifique et en innovation de la recherche en glycomique. I will continue in English now. So mainly, Gliconet was created in 2015 under the mandate of the NC program. And we regroup 200 research scientists across Canada, across 37 universities. And there was a need for services, because this is really an emerging technology and an emerging field of research. And you need really important infrastructure and expensive infrastructure and specialized skills. So the integrated services were created organically. And what will happen here is when there was a call, the last call of CFI MSI, we decided to go for the call, and we are funded since 2023 at 10.7 million for 6 years. So we are one of the smaller in the round here.
Thanks very much, Elizabeth. Should be François now.
Okay, mic is working. So hello, my name is François Légaré. I'm the director of the Energy Material Telecommunications Center of INRS, CEO of the Advanced Laser Light Source. So the Advanced Laser Light Source was initially funded with the same competition than the Amazon and Snow Lab in 2002 with this international venture fund. I was a PhD student at that time. And so with the idea of having a laser facility, high power laser facility in Canada, serving users from Canada and across the world, then in 2014, thanks to a major private donation, we were able to upgrade the 200 terawatt laser system. Just to give you an idea, all the electricity production in the world is 10 terawatt. At that time, we had 200 terawatt. With this donation, we were able to increase to 750 terawatt. We have 750 terawatt, but only within 17 femtosecond, okay? Not full time. So that's why we can reach really high peak power. Then in 2018, the National Academy of Science in the United States made a report highlighting the importance of high power laser facilities. And following this report, DOE has decided to create the LaserNet US network. So in 2019, we were contacted as the sole Canadian facility to be part of the LaserNet US network. And then also, thanks to an upgrade from CFI in 2017, we were upgrading the facility with high average power ytterbium laser technologies. So we got MSI funding from 2014 to 2017. Then we had the gap. And then from 23 to 2030, we received funding thanks to CFI. Also, I always like to compare it like a F1 team. An F1 team has about 10 people, so we are rather small. A budget of $700K per year from CFI, including the IOF from the 2017 Innovation Fund. But, we need people that are not widely available. Tomorrow, if I need to change a laser technician, it will take a lot of time to find a good one, and I will need to train it in-house for at least 1 year. So it's really like running complicated equipment that are not yet standard. So it's really pushing the photonic technologies at their limit and serving users.
Thanks very much, Francois. And I did have the pleasure of meeting Roland from the National Science Foundation that's here visiting us from the States, sitting on our table. But that's this cross-border collaboration is absolutely vital that we keep up with these more challenging times. The last but not least is my boss, so we'll see how this goes during my performance review coming up. But Volker, please give a quick intro on VIDO.
Yeah, good morning. I'm Volker Gitz. I'm the director and CEO of VIDO, the Vaccine and Infectious Disease Organization at the University of Saskatchewan. And so we provide Canadian researchers with access to high containment and manufacturing that is needed for infectious disease research and the development of vaccines and critical countermeasures, medicines, and so on. And so we're very, very fortunate to operate at the university, one of the largest high containment facilities in the whole world. We're a rather large organization now with over 200 members of staff. And what we are expanding right now, or what we're doing with investment from government, all levels of government, including the province. So the provincial government is very, very supportive of the work that's going on at the university and especially at the MSI facilities. What we're doing right now is expanding our capacity to even handle the highest level of containment. So that's called containment level 4, meaning that in the future, Vito will be able to offer access to Canadian researchers and international research to work with essentially every pathogen there is, human or animal. We have now constructed and operating already an in-house vaccine manufacturing facility, which can both manufacture human and veterinary vaccines and give Canadian researchers access to everything that is entailed in the process of manufacturing, from process development to actual commercial manufacturing. And then we're currently also expanding our animal housing capacities by adding a new animal facility to it, which again will then allow Canadian researchers to have access to essentially all levels that are needed, or all models that are needed for for infectious disease research, from very small animal models to large animal models to exotic models and so on. So altogether, this is becoming Canada's Centre for Pandemic Research. It will have everything you need to respond to the next threat, whether it's a health emergency, whether it's a threat to our food security, or whether it's a threat to the health of Canadians overall. And so that's really the vision for Vito to move forward. We've been funded by CFI essentially for a decade now, currently receiving in the range of 55 million for the last 6 years.
Thanks very much, Volker. So for the audience, what we had is we have, as a group, we came up with sort of 4 themes, questions that we'd like to try and address today. So as you can tell, we have about an hour. So we're going to look at, trying to do about 15 minutes per theme. The 4 themes are MSI facilities as national innovation anchors, innovation sovereignty in a global context, discovery to commercialization impact, and different roles of these facilities in driving innovations forward. And really then the future. And the future was looking at policies that might be impacting these facilities and how they operate, not only from an academic or university-based policies, but both provincial governments as well as federal governments. So for example, I know the government of Saskatchewan is very supportive of Vito from the matching funding support and how some of those policies really help in the success of the facilities overall. And it wasn't going to be trying to be tricky here, so we'll just start with theme question number 1. And maybe, Francois, you touched a little bit on HQP and the value of finding these people, but I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about, or lead the discussion on, why you think your facility was chosen as an MSI, and you had those two funding, no funding again from an innovation.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So as I said, we have a unique infrastructure, including the highest peak power laser in the country. With these lasers, we contribute to developing photonic-based technologies. Many of us here, we are touching photonic-based technologies without knowing. The best example is communication. We communicate things to photons, send in fiber optics. So we develop photonic-based technologies. We train people to work with photonic-based technologies. And those photonic-based technologies are key for many innovation sectors. So I think that's why we were chosen. Advanced manufacturing, biomedical, quantum, information and communication technologies, energy. Photonics is everywhere. It's an enabling technology. So for example, we have projects now on better understanding quantum materials and how to integrate them into devices. We have a project with Quantum Valley Investment and Infinite Potential Laboratories on building secondary sources of particles and extreme radiation with laser-driven. And I will give you an example. 10 years ago, I was funded by DARPA with other people, and they had a project in the US to put a neutron source on a truck. I mean, you can put a laser on a truck. The project failed. 10 years ago, the technology was not there. But today, the technology is available to have portable source of extreme radiations on a truck, on demand, whatever you want it in the country. At least there's a need for a road, okay? As long as there's a road, we can bring the sources. So these are technologies that are key for many sectors of innovation, and we can make them available where they are needed. So I think on this perspective, we contribute to innovation.
Thanks. So really that basic, broad-based aspect to help drive some of the innovation. Elizabeth, I think you have really that basic understanding too from glyconet and trying to look at glycosylation patterns for the immune response. Can you maybe comment on
Yes,
that?
for sure. So, glyconet works on the study of carbohydrate and the complex carbohydrate, which is very new. And it's a platform technology. Imagine that genomics 20 years ago, it is where now glycomics is. It's a platform technology. It can do a lot of things, but it's very complicated, and the machines have to be very specialized. So what we have done at Glyconet to make sure that everybody can benefit from that, we have looked at across the universities where is the infrastructure as well as the expertise. So we have actually a distributed facility across 7 universities, and we have 35 million in infrastructure. So we have some unique instruments, like we have the glyconeer, which is an oligosaccharide synthesizer. There are 12 in the world. We have also proprietary technologies. And with that, we offer this service to our network, Glyconet, but also to all the scientists across Canada, as well as international partners and academia. And examples of what can be done through glycomics, universal blood. This is something that we have contributed to. We have some things I will discuss later on the maple syrup. We have some diagnostic for monitoring Parkinson's disease, which is now, you just see the symptoms, but there will be a molecular marker to see that. We have also the creation of vaccine for pigs to avoid zoonotic disease. So you can see it's very broad, and I think we were selected because this is a future and the next frontier of innovation. So thank you for CFI for investing in us.
Perfect. Thanks, Elizabeth. Volker or Alex, any comments on your MSI from an innovation perspective? I think two very large facilities, but two very, very different aspects with respect to what they do.
Yeah. So I've heard twice the word unique. I think it's really important to underscore that we are unique facilities, and the Amundsen is actually along that line. We are unique because we play a role in Canada of providing sustained capability in the Arctic. And this word capability will come very often in the next hour, I believe, because this is actually the moving forwards about innovation sovereignty and developing capacity to develop innovations and knowledge for the country. So for the Arctic especially, we study this environment that is strategically, environmentally, but also economically important and critical for the country. And I have just 3 things, just quickly. First, it allows us to actually, Canada, to generate this environmental knowledge about the Arctic. And this is really important because this knowledge and the data that we produce will really inform decision-making, about Arctic shipping, fisheries, development of marine protected areas, how climate adaptation is developed, and so on. So having the ability to produce this knowledge really in-house is really an important technical component of this independence. Second, the vessel itself function as an innovation platform to develop or adapt new technologies to extreme environments. So we work with all the Canadian researchers in Canada, the RDC included, to develop ocean sensors, autonomous platforms, acoustic systems, and so on, monitoring systems that can work under real-time conditions that are in the Arctic, as you can understand, quite severe. And third, the Amundsen is really helping, and actually all of us are doing that, I believe, really developing this national expertise. It's, again, along the lines of developing capability, national expertise, bridging across scientists, engineers, technicians, but also Inuit and other indigenous partners. For us, it's a reality. And then what we do is increasingly playing a leadership role in Arctic research and monitoring. So we're not simply a research ship. We are a mobile national infrastructure. And it's, I think, the world unique, just coming back to it, it's really represent what we have to develop in Canada.
Volker, any closing comments on that first question?
Yeah, I think just briefly from our perspective, so we've been selected because of our track record in economic development. We developed and licensed 8 vaccines that had billions of dollars in economic impact to the livestock industries. We worked with more than 1,000 users or thousands of users really over the last few years. But I think probably from our perspective, the most important effort that we've done over the last few years is really increasing the tech readiness level of our research, really focusing on making our research more applicable to our industry partners. So what we do at Vito can be used directly by our commercial partners for then registration of products with the regulatory authorities. And so that's really, really important. That saves time, that saves cost. And by us doing it in a way that the industry can directly use the data that we have created, we've seen tremendous benefit over the last few years.
And Volker and I have been at Vito, he's a little bit longer, but both of us have been there close to 25 years. And the change that we've seen over that as really in an academic environment, but having that translation or transition of thinking about the end product as you're working through this, which has been an absolutely incredible experience for both of us, I'd say. We've already touched on the second question a little bit. What unique role does your MSI play in supporting Canada's technology and economic independence? But I'm wondering if there's anything further you want to say. And I know Sylvain already mentioned Canada's defense industrial strategy, which seems to be one of the departments has a lot of money right now. How your facility may or may not be able to play a role in some of those key innovation strategies around technologies and economic independence. It might be that you've already touched on it, but I don't know if there's any further that you would want to say. Any of the panelists can speak up on that second question, but really, Alex, I'd leave it to you to start.
Yeah, actually, I developed already a few things. I can come back to it. Of course, it's natural. So developing environmental intelligence, having this national innovation platform, and also building this national expertise. But what I think we can add on that is that it's really the model that we are developing with the MSIs, this university-led model. For the Amundsen, it has been so important because we brought back universities at sea, and it was really actually important to bring students at sea working in the north because the Arctic environment, you cannot understand it to some extent if you don't have this personal experience with it. And I think that the facilities that we are managing offer or propose actually this kind of experience in different approaches. And that's exactly where we need to focus, developing this new generation of experts, and then having this capacity, this mobile national platform as we are, or actually some very exotic facilities that needs to be sustained. And then developing this capability will be at the end what we need to be really sovereign in terms of innovation.
Thanks. So I did go on the website, your website, and there is a virtual tour you can take of the ship. I was trying to translate that back to Vito. What virtual tour could I give without actually breaking any sort of security challenges that we might have around high containment research? But it's a neat thing, and I actually kind of figured how I could get on the ship myself.
Yeah, it took a few years before actually trying to convince the Coast Guard that we would like to publish that on the web. You know, it's a Coast Guard vessel, a bit confidential, secret to some extent. But finally, we could get the green light because it's also for them, and it is really important, the recruitment of personnel that would like to go at sea and do and support this research. And when they see it from a screen, I think they can project themselves into this environment. Same thing for students. We're receiving actually more CVs than ever in our facility to work as part of the facility. And I think this kind of activity is really showcasing that we need to be, to some extent, really more vocal about what we do.
And I do think that training aspect is mentioned not only in, I'm more familiar with Canada's biomanufacturing and life sciences strategy, but in the new defense industrial strategy too. Francois, you touched a little bit on the value of HQP and that unique niche you fill for that technology.
Yeah, I'll start with an example of the impact of training. So we are all aware of the Canada Impact Share Program. So we are soliciting companies to support potential shareholders. So I had a discussion with someone this week from Quandela in Sherbrooke in the innovation zone, the Quantum Innovation Zone district. And I just, well, he was a former student of mine that was put in contact with me. So I didn't know that he was working with Quandela. So Quandela is a quantum-based company based in Sherbrooke. They want to make quantum photonic computers. And quantum is a really key technology for defense. So photonics, as I said, has many applications, civilian applications. But for example, DRDC have an electro-optic division in Valcartier. The people working there, they were trained the same years I was trained at the NRC. I know them, we were going to the same conferences, so we received the same training. So photonics have civilian applications, but often there's also military and defense application. And I will give a last example. I think 3 weeks ago, I was contacted by, I think it was 3 weeks ago. Yeah, I was contacted by a company in Toronto. They are making radar and micro radar. You are all aware of the problems with drones, so you can detect them. But with lasers, we can damage them. We can put them down. So this is a capability that we don't have in Canada. There's no company in Canada manufacturing systems to destroy drones. And you can see in many other parts of the world, drone has many negative impacts. So if we want to protect ourselves, we need those technologies, and photonics will play a key role because it's an enabling technology. And just a final word, information and communication technologies, ICT. This is very broad. Lasers and photonics is part of ICT. Defense requires ICT. Security needs ICT. It's fundamental, so photonics will play a big role. And the training of HQP will feed the industry to make sure that we can develop and manufacture in Canada.
So thanks. Elizabeth or Fulker?
Yes, for Glyconet, we are more into, again, it's a platform technology. So what we see how we can help with the new priorities of the government is dual use. So dual use is developing technologies that can be used for civilians as well as for the army and defense. So, for example, we are helping developing a test for organ transplantation to make sure that to have a more precise donor-receptor, organ donor and receptor. And this is very important because the highest population, like one of the niche population that needs the most the organ transplantation are our veterans. They have been exposed to toxin and other things, and their kidneys are failing. So having a possibility to have a better diagnostic between the donor and the receptor is very important, because now we are relying on a 125-year-old test that is not precise, and that will save lives and save organs to to spare some organs. So this is one of example of how Glyconet contribute to the priorities. We have also, again, working on vaccine and also pandemic preparedness. So that's another possibility. And that will be something that we can work. What we like about the Glyconet is we can start a project and then pass it on video, for example, if it is vaccine. So there's a continuum between the MSI. We are not working in silos. So this is really important. And yes, and also training, because glycomics is new and we are quite expert in the world here in Canada, but everybody is catching up. There's a lot of investment recently in all the countries. We are checking, like China, Japan, US, Australia, Europe, everybody's investing in glycomics. So to keep this, we have to make sure that we are still performing, and the MSI is helping a lot because we have some expertise that we can provide and accelerate innovation, and we provide training too, for sure.
Fulker, anything to add?
Or for Vito, it's really biodefense where we can make a contribution, and it's all about recognizing any bio acts of fire terrorism or bioweapons, and essentially you need the same infrastructure that you need to respond to a new disease. So you need to have high containment, you need to have the research expertise, and you need to have in-house manufacturing capacity to develop countermeasures. So again, what we have already can be used to strengthen our ability to respond to any threats.
Thanks. So if I was to get a theme there, I think a lot of it was about preparedness from different aspects. Trainees seem to be one of the big preparedness. It's not in our themes or questions, but maybe I'd ask the panel to think about it in that crowd. Is this a chicken or the egg? As we continue to train as a priority for the government of Canada, do we have the receptors in place for our trainees to actually find jobs in that relevant area? So I think that's something maybe from a policy perspective we can think about too. I'll just move on to the next theme if this works, correct? So this is really what a lot of it was about. So now you've heard from the four CFI facilities, two that are named as MRF facilities and two MSI facilities. So bigger and smaller from a funding perspective, but touching on innovation sovereignty in a global context and the definition itself of innovation sovereignty. So I'm wondering, I'm going to get this from each of the panelists. I'm guessing there's going to be a lot of overlap. I'm hoping that there's not too much disparity in what they view of it, but maybe Volker, you could start with this on a definition of innovation sovereignty.
Sure. So innovation sovereignty to us really means that Canada has a critical infrastructure, has the workforce, and also has the industry partners to be able to self-sufficiently address critical areas like food security, water, energy, critical minerals, and also health. And so the MSI facilities, in my mind, can play a critical role in providing that infrastructure, but also train the workforce that is needed to be able to self-sufficiently respond to whatever the next crisis is. And more importantly, I think for us also to work with industry, Canadian domestic industry, whether it's small or large biopharma in our case, or biotech, of course, in other cases, other industries, to ensure that what we develop in Canada will stay in Canada, will be manufactured in Canada, and will be available to Canadians for use. And so as a nation, we need to think about how we keep innovation that is developed in Canada, how we keep it in Canada for the benefit of Canadians, because that's what taxpayers at the end of the day are paying us to do, are paying the MSI facilities to do, to develop innovations that directly benefit Canadians first, and then, of course, others in the world too. So, I mean, everything we do for Canada will benefit Canadians, but also will benefit people in other countries around the world. And so training is an important mission, infrastructure is an important mission, but then, as I said, industry and working with industry is an important mission. And so for Vito, for example, we've worked with hundreds of industry partners over the last few years, including during the pandemic, working with more than 100 organizations just within essentially 2 years, helping them to develop their technologies. And so that's very, very important when we think about our role as MSI facilities, that we drive that innovation pipeline in Canada to ensure that as a country, we don't depend on other countries. And innovation sovereignty for me also means that we need to think about things like supply chains, for example. I mean, we can only do this when we all work together on securing the necessary supplies that are needed to do this kind of research. Whether that means we need to build the manufacturing capacity in Canada to guarantee the supply of these whatever we need for our research, or whether we sign partnerships with other countries, but diversified and have multiple countries providing us with that supply so that we can do our research in a way that we're not affected by any global changes as we're seeing them right now. So it's really all about thinking how we as an MSI facility can contribute to what Canada needs in the future and strengthen our industry in Canada to develop and manufacture those technologies that Canadians need.
Thanks, Volker. I will. So we've just come out of a pandemic. Vito was pretty intimate in helping a lot of things. And one of the things that we were very fortunate from Vito is we had stockpiles of personal protective equipment that we had to use, as well as supply chains. But my wife is an anesthesiologist, and I know from the first responders and other people that were immediately dealing with infected patients, supply chain of N95 masks, face shields, and other things for our first responders was really challenged. And one of the, well, it's side effects of having the facility in Saskatchewan is we partnered with Saskatchewan Health Authority, and we were collecting all the personal protective equipment from the hospitals and running full decontamination cycles with approval from Health Canada and giving it back to the hospitals as backup supply, as this was trying to be figured out from a supply chain for our healthcare workers. And then that was used around the world too, using vaporous hydrogen peroxide. So I think what we have to be very cognizant of in the event of a an extreme situation is that those supply chains can dissolve even if they were established, and having backups. And I know from in our area, Health Emergency Readiness Canada is looking at that. From an innovation sovereignty, an icebreaker up north and protecting our Arctic. Alex, has to be you next.
Of course, it just makes sense. But if I just wanted to simplify a bit this aspect of innovation sovereignty, it looks a bit complex when we look at it, but it's really about having this capacity, this capability to generate, control, but also mobilize knowledge in areas that are strategically important to the country. And actually, Francois just mentioned the Impact Plus research chairs. I think this mobilization and translation of knowledge into practical application, decision making is really something that is part of the pipeline of innovation, as Volker mentioned. In the Arctic context, so sovereignty, it's really about scientific and operational at the same time. If we don't have actually Canada, the infrastructures to observe, understand, and operate in the Arctic, we will simply become dependent on knowledge, data, and technologies produced elsewhere. So this is where Canada can lead instead of only participating. And actually with the ship that we have, we're bringing the world on the ship. So we're leading from a position of strength, but still collaborating with the world. So we generate scientific knowledge about the Arctic environment, increasingly also with indigenous holders, knowledge holders. I think this is really important. This territory is inhabited by many people that suffered from the past in Canada, and we need to bring them at the level of the of international, those regional priorities needs to be translated into also global questions, which is really something challenging to some extent, but we're getting there. So this evidence that will be produced domestically is really important. As I just mentioned, Arctic research cannot be done from an isolated perspective. We need to work all the countries. Of course, there's different views about that these days, but this is what we think it should be the case. And we participating in a global collaboration from a position of strength. I think this is really where Canada can play a great role. Instead of leading from an isolated point of view, we're leading with others from a position of strength. So this is where Canada can contribute infrastructure, data, expertise, and relying primarily on ourselves instead of others.
Thanks. Francois or Elizabeth?
Yeah, well,
Go ahead.
for me, national sovereignty means to have the humans, like the brains, the people, the highly qualified personnel, to ensure that we can perform the research, the innovation, the technology transfer, and at the end, to manufacture in the country. So we need to make sure that when there's a new idea, we can push it from low TRL to high TRL, that there are companies that can take those technologies, commercialize them, to ensure that there's enough, again, trained people to ensure that we cover the entire supply chain for the high-tech companies. And again, I will go back to photonics. We all know the aerospace industry. Aerospace is big, you have like big players. We see them on the news. Photonics is mostly SMEs. We don't hear that much about them. Just for Quebec, there are 220 companies in photonics. It's more than $3 billion of sales, mostly abroad, every year. These companies, they need people. They are desperate, in fact, to have people to grow. And so for me, you asked the question in one of your email about the threat for national sovereignty. It's the lack of people that can support the growth of companies, because you can invest massively in infrastructures, but if there's no one to operate them, if there's no one to, at the end, commercialize the products and make money such that money comes in the country for the best of our country, well, you're going to fail. So for me, it starts with training people.
Okay, so for me, innovation sovereignty means that you can innovate, translate, and adapt. Okay, so for that, you need research infrastructure, the expertise, the talent needed to innovate here in Canada. But it also means keeping ownership of IP, intellectual property, and commercializing it. So you need to have, like the MSI, I see them as innovation hubs and connectors between academia and industry. But also, in our case at Glyconet, we are fortunate we have the MSI, but we do have another part of funding that allow us, when we have a technology, and I would take one simple one, the creation of like converting all the blood to universal blood. So what we have done is, a blood group A, B, and O, they differ just by one sugar, okay? So they needed this, this set of sugars as a test to try to find an enzyme. So we provided the sugar, okay? So they found the enzyme to cut and make universal blood. So after that, you have to protect the IP. So we do have funding for IP. We can help them protect with the universities the IP. And we do also have money for startup companies. And this is where we invested in this company. We invested only 25,000. The company now has won the NATO award for NATO Diana Award because this biosecurity, you need blood, it's dual use. So this is a type of things that we have started, and it comes to that. But you need, for sure, innovation. So you need the MSIs, you need the brain power, the talent, you need the IP. So you need to have somebody to provide the IP, and you need a possibility to create spin-off companies because they stay in Canada. And what is important with the spin-off companies, you recruit your own students to that. So this company has recruited all the PhDs going out of it. So this is really a virtuous circle. And success brings success. So if you see more and more successful spin-off companies, you will have more creation, and that will be our sovereignty.
Thanks. So, Volker, you already touched on the second question here, and I think the group did. We don't necessarily have to spend much time on it. You mentioned our Ito's interaction with industry. I think that was also mentioned by Francois with an uptake of industry. But is there a way, in your experience, again, at Vito now for almost a quarter of a century, that we can better align MSI's universities and industry to build broader or more impactful innovation facet?
Yeah, so we've seen a lot of efforts over the last few years to build these biomanufacturing hubs, for example, so where industry directly works with universities. Universities is really where innovation happens, right? The role of universities is to provide that environment for innovation to happen, for discovery to happen, maybe even go to the proof of concept level, but then partner with industry to take over and eventually commercialize those technologies. And so anything we can do of bringing those two together, bringing our MSIs together, directly working with all levels of industry, um, is helping in driving this innovation technology forward. And so universities, in my mind at least, really need to recognize that. We need to think about how we reward innovation at universities, how we focus on outcomes rather than on outputs, how we count papers, and when we go for promotions rather than looking at IP and technology development or any community work and so on. How we really facilitate the intellectual discovery that was generated at the university to translate into real solutions that people can use. And so that comes back to what I said earlier, the focus on tech readiness level. But for example, at Vito, we're providing users with access to regulatory experts, to clinical trial experts, to manufacturing experts, to process development experts. So you come and do your research as a user using our facility, using the MSI, but at the same time, you can think already about how your technology will make it to market, what is critical by going to market, what are the critical steps you need to do, what information you have to provide to regulators later on, and so on. So all making sure that our research is not only aligned, but also focused on getting technologies to market.
Any other panelists want to comment on that alignment aspect from MSI's? Francois? Oh.
Well, I think one way to help startup companies, for example, could be to embed these companies into the development of research infrastructure and even the operation. So often, like spin-off companies are, as you mentioned, start by our former students, and they are the ones who are the best to operate. So to ease the embedding of startup companies and in general companies in the operation, the development, the maintenance of our infrastructure, because one of the things that always puzzle me when I get CFI Innovation Fund is I'm buying equipment where I spend most of the money abroad. And so basically it's a loss of money. Could we have more internal resources in the country for manufacturing scientific equipment? So I think one way to do it will be to embed in our operation, in our development, the startup companies that we create to make sure that we have in-house capability for manufacturing scientific equipment in the beginning. And then again, for photonics, it could even go to security and defense and dual use. So I think that could be a model that could be explored to help the startup companies.
Thanks. Alex or Elizabeth?
Yeah, actually, for the Amundsen, working with the industry, of course, it's like supporting development of ocean sensors and this kind of activity. But back about 15 years ago, the Amundsen has been used also to collect a large environmental database to potentially develop oil and gas exploration and exploitation in the Arctic. That was back in the days, of course, there's a moratorium on oil and gas these days. But this is exactly where we can play a role when there's a need, which is, providing this baseline data to develop natural resources in a sustainable manner. And I think for us, working with the industry, in addition of the technology development, it's really about serving the country's interest in terms of independence, in terms of energy and so on. So this is a good example, and it was criticized a lot 15 years ago, but it's, we could come back to it at some point, depending on the government needs and wishes.
Thanks. Elizabeth, maybe for time, we'll
Yeah.
pause for you because I know you have a really neat story on the commercialization aspect, and you're a distributed network. So I think that you could tie all that in with the next question. So what we just heard there was different definitions of innovation sovereignty, but really some of the key leads for Canada, I think, was keep ownership of IP, training of people, brain power, growing the industry, and data control were some of the major ones. So this is now unknown territory to me, and it didn't work. So it was very unknown territory.
Yeah. Okay. So, as I mentioned, like,
Hold on. Sorry, like
are we good now?
here.
No, yes.
Okay. All right. So this is, I don't have my distance glasses on, so I can't really read that. But what is the single biggest risk to innovation sovereignty? These are just items that I and the team put together. I tried to capture what we just talked about a little bit, and then I captured one under other. But if everyone is willing to try and do this, I would be very curious from an audience, because we do have a diverse group of facilities here where we think, well, that's
That's fine.
got one vote. We'll give it a couple of minutes from an innovation sovereignty perspective. So one of the things I don't have there is funding, for sure. So I guess that would be another from an uptake of where we're going for the facilities.
Can you read what is under
Pardon me?
the first column? What is it? I cannot read it slow.
Oh, so I think first is brain drain.
Okay.
Second is external dependence on critical technologies. So example, chips. For my area would be, we didn't have biomanufacturing or much biomanufacturing left in Canada. All the vaccines for COVID basically came from external sources. Reliance on foreign technology platforms, Microsoft, Google, Amazon. Foreign control of IP. And the historic Canadian success story, I think, unfortunately, is we bring it to a certain level, a US or other country buys it and relocates it or controls the IP after buying it. And then really the scale up or commercialization gap, which really seems to be the winner there from, we're able to bring it to a certain level, and then it gets, it dies in Canada because of lack. I guess you could say that's lack. So maybe someone from CFI, I don't know if that's stored or can take a snapshot of it. And thanks very much for your participation. Maybe that'll come into a policy discussion if we have time. I'm trying to watch the time. No, we can, I think we can go on to the next question, discovery to commercialization impact. How do I go back?
Okay.
So the theme here was really around, so you saw that scale up gap commercialization was a big one. So the theme was around the commercialization impact. And the first question, really, we have 4 facilities here, very diverse with what they do. You have examples of research outcomes from your facility that have helped drive commercial or economic impact in Canada. And some of those could be very direct and maybe some could be a little obscure. But Elizabeth, I know you have, I call it the quintessential Canadian story. So if you want to go into that one a little bit, I love the
Okay.
story.
So Paul insisted for that one. Um, I mentioned several examples on medical application. This one will be on agriculture and the maple syrup. So as you know, Canada is known, like when you talk about Canada abroad, they think about maple syrup. So it's very important. And Canada produces 72% of the total amount of maple syrup. 70%, which means that the industry is worth of 840 million a year. Okay, and it's so important that Quebec has a strategic maple syrup reserve that can hold 60,000 tons of maple syrup. And this is to stabilize the price of the maple syrup. Like you have the gold, we have maple syrup, okay? This is how it is. And it's really important because it has a value that we make sure that the quality and the authenticity are protected in this the field, if you want. And how do you control quality in the maple syrup? Do you know how people do? How to control quality? They sample it and test it. It's human. And with humans, there's always error and it's subjective. So you cannot detect, for example, the off flavors, or you cannot check from which region the maple syrup comes and other things. So what at Glyconet Integrated Services, what we are doing, we are developing a new glycomics-based fingerprinting technology to improve the quality control of maple syrup. So this is based on advanced spectroscopy and artificial intelligence. Like that, we can create a molecular fingerprint database. And like that, you can confirm the authenticity as well as detect adulteration. So it can also help us understand the environmental conditions. And when, for example, you stop collecting the maple syrup. And what will be nice is, so this is pool research, like we have requests for that. So it is industry asking. So we are working with cooperatives. We have independent producers. We are working with the city of Mirabel. We have also some, samples that we buy to make sure that everything is analyzed. And you can see that this is really of interest. And, we have independent producers providing their own sample to check. So if you think about that, this type of molecular fingerprinting could help protect designation or appellation d'origine contrôlée. And that would be super for maple syrup, like maple syrup Canada AOC. So that would be really great, and it can help the industry. So I know it's just food. It's still 840 million a year in the term of market. It employs thousands of people, I think 3,000 to 4,000 people, and it's part of Canada's identity. So sovereignty too will go there.
Diverse economy, and I still remember very clearly the Canadian maple syrup heist that hit international news several years ago. So fundamental, vital, and I think as quintessential Canadian as you can possibly get. Volker, you already mentioned some of the outputs from Vito from a vaccine perspective. Do you have any further examples of our commercial impact that you'd like to provide?
Yeah, so like we said earlier, Vito over the years developed 8 vaccines that have been licensed to industry, creating billions of dollars in economic impact. I think important is that 6 of those were world's first, really where Vito was doing the research to then show that technologies that initially were only thought would work in humans can also work in animals at a cost that is sustainable in animals. So it's really the research that goes into these technologies that really creates the economic benefit to the country. But we also have done a lot of contract research over the years, so more than $270 million worth in contract research just over the last 5 years. And much of that is also from international partners, so bringing money into Canada because of the expertise and the infrastructure we're offering to international users. So again, there's the benefit of global partnerships, of global development, of collaboration, but also the pure economic impact of working with international partners too.
Thanks. François?
Well, in our case, we work a lot with SMEs and also startup companies. So, for example, we've been working with Phantom in the recent years, which is based in Quebec City. A couple of years ago, they were like 3-4 employees. They are now more than 30. They have received capital investment recently of $13 million. So, the company is growing. We put research personnel available to help them, to support them, to develop these technologies. So I'm not saying that we have contributed fully to their growth, but we are there to support. And of course, the company is based on young entrepreneurs that are very active. In-house, we have created Fuel Cycle. It's an outcome from one of my former research associates. Initially was 1 employee, it's now 15 employees. So again, developing instruments for the scientific market, potentially also for the security and defense. And touching on AI, I have an employee right now who wants to start a company on AI driving photonic systems. So basically predicting the photonic system using AI. So rather, instead of solving very complex equations, you basically train your system with AI to get to what you want faster. So I can see our facility playing a key role in supporting the startup companies to emerge.
If I was to continue to dive deeper into that, the next question is really what mechanisms do you have in place to facilitate this transition, which is fine. But maybe more interesting to the audience is what barriers exist. So as you're trying to do this economic impact or commercial impact, whether that's in a system you're in an academic environment, whether that's uptake, that we don't have enough companies, what barriers do you think are existing that are actually impeding us as a country from fully utilizing the systems and facilities that we have in place?
Very quick. So, ALS is part of INRS. So at INRS, there's really no barrier. We're very proactive with the research contracts to make sure that the companies get access to the IP, that we do the technology transfer. I will say the main barrier for us, the startup companies, often they need lab space. And given that lab space is very limited, and given that, for the startup to invest in lab space outside the institute is very expensive, this is really what makes the limitation. They need space, but space is not available. So if I will have to invest in the infrastructure, and in fact, we do have a project submitted at the government of Quebec to getting more space, will be to allocate space for collaborative projects with the startup companies to help them to grow. And at the same time, as I said before, embedding them in our operation and our development.
I do note from a Vito perspective that one of our VPs for innovation, Saskatchewan, is in the audience that controls our innovation FARC for space. To take that home as an answer for some of the vital aspects. Anyone else want to comment on barriers that exist to commercialization? Alexander, I know you pull in people from around the world. You said it's much more of a basic research, but then that data is leaving back. How are you either facilitating bringing them in, or is there barriers that exist from bringing people from other countries onto a Coast Guard vessel? Like it could be as simple as immigration.
Yeah, there are actually 2 types here, two questions. First, the technicians that are working with us, they need to go through the immigration process, and typically we don't have this work, actually the humans that in Canada to to sustain, actually operate some of the systems that we do have. So we need to rely on external humans. And then when they come to Canada, it's really challenging to bring them. Immigration process is really hard. Otherwise, for the participants themselves, for international participants coming on the ship, we have a lot of processes in place to facilitate their presence. Actually, what is really interesting is that sometimes for someone from abroad, it's easier than someone from the north, an Inuit, let's say, to come on board, because those people sometimes they don't have a passport. It's challenging to get their fingerprints, and so on. So we're facing here some processes that are really challenging on our side to empower the north with their own leadership. And this is it's also it's bringing the world on the ship, but it's also making sure that the north is able to lead and sustain their environment. So I think this is a really interesting question about facilitating others from abroad, but also making sure that internally in Canada we empower the people that needs to be empowered.
I do think it's a shame when our own processes interfere with our ability to drive innovation. And Vito is an ISO certified facility, and I still remember when we brought the ISO certification through, it said it's not the problem with the person, it's a problem with the process. And I do think from an innovation perspective, we really need to look at processes that we know are hindering progress, and trying to either lobby government if that's where the process is, or if it's academic, trying to figure out how to really drive that forward and move things along. Elizabeth or Volker, any aspects that you want to discuss on barriers with commercialization?
For example, barriers to commercialization. So what we do is when we provide a service, we don't take position on IP. So the IP is there. We also help sometimes, like we have done that with one startup company, but it was a service company. They have developed a technology and they wanted to become a service company. And what we did is to help them, to integrate them in our services, to try to test the service if they are customers, if it is viable before they spun out. So this is what we did. Like when we have, if we have a service company coming in, so we'll keep them within the GIS integrated services. We'll make them part of that, so they have the facilities, they can use their technology, they have our website, they can market their technology, and we provide all the administrative part behind. And when they think that their business case is strong enough, they can spin out really. And so we are kind of like a incubator for a while.
Thanks. Booker, anything?
Not really.
So I think the next one's another Menti question. I'm just noticing the time. We have about 10 minutes left. I can't read that, so on my sheet is, what capability must Canada preserve or build to remain innovation sovereign? Really, from a commercialization perspective, I can't see what all the things are there, but I was thinking more of a word cloud, whether that's, you've heard training, you've heard industry, you've heard receptors, but really we have a diverse group of CFI facilities here. I know we have government people in the audience. What really are we doing? What missing, or what must we make sure we don't lose to make sure that we maintain innovation sovereign with respect to the commercialization? And I'll give it about, I'll wait till we get, I don't know what the statistical power of 105 would be, maybe 30 of 105. And then the last two, as we move on to it, as these answers are captured, I'm hoping there's some level of consistency, would really be around policy. And we'll just close out on the policy aspects. And at the start of this, I mentioned, I'm not sure I've been completely ignoring this side of the room. I'm not sure what policy we could think of. It could be academic policies, because I think almost all of us are university-based infrastructures. It could be provincial government policies. It could be federal government policies. And right now, federal government seems to be the highlight because of budgets that I think has yet to be approved, and some of the different innovation aspects driven under the Defense Industrial Strategy and other things. But we'll move the next one under that. I don't know what happens out of this. I can't see that far. And someone that's closer to the screen, help me. Who won?
That's a bit vegan.
Maybe what we could do, Sebastian, tomorrow, could we put up some of the results of this tomorrow morning? Excellent. Thanks. So we'll just go back to the last two questions around policy and really about the future too. So how do we continue to influence policy to drive a future resilient, sovereign innovation ecosystem? So, Alex?
Yes, I think that the most important thing when trying to influence is trying to align, actually. So, for instance, for us, we're working with two ministries. Of course, ISED, to which we are funded through CFI and so on. But on the other hand, now it's still the Coast Guard, but now it's under defense. And I think there's an alignment to be done here. I don't know exactly how we can further continue this discussion, but it's really important that the different ministries, they can discuss among each other. And especially when discussing research infrastructures, Canada is building two very large icebreakers these days, 3.25 billion each. They are really fully made for science, but the mandate itself needs to be transposed. And the agreement to use these ships as national research infrastructures, we still need to do some work. So it's coming. So I think it's really about aligning things more than influencing.
Perfect. Thank you. Anyone else?
I'll be short. I mean, we need to bring talents to the country. So, immigration policy is like a roller coaster. And in Quebec, it's something else. So to have a more stable situation in terms of immigration policy to make sure that we can attract talents to the country rather than a roller coaster where roles are changing all the time. This is really has negative impact on our capability to grow our research capabilities because, as I said, we need people.
So do you mean innovation policy from investment? Do you mean like SHRED? Do you mean innovation policy from
an immigration policy, student permit, policy? And I think like decoupling graduate students from undergrad, like all the students are treated the same way right now, whether it's college or PhD. So this will really negatively impact. I mean, if we don't have enough PhD students, we will not be able to support the high-tech companies and all these defense strategies. If we want to grow companies, we need people. And, the kids at high school are not yet close to the PhD. So it will take 10 to 15 years. So we really need to fix this and have a stable situation for the recruitment of talents from abroad.
So not only the immigration policies, but really, Vito does this too, at the high school level, even earlier, looking at trying to drive this home as a potential career. So that interest starts early enough that they push.
That will be my answer to the last question regarding high school.
Elizabeth or Folker?
Oh, okay, I will go. So for me, the Canadian universities are very innovative. So it's not a problem there. It's how we translate this innovation into commercial outcome and to companies and to jobs. So one thing I can see is at the level of IP protection, like patent, right? How can we ensure that IP is not licensed too early? Okay, so how do we keep it longer when we add value to the technology before we commercialize it? And so I had, one of the possibilities and is the government to provide. So I had a discussion with ISED yesterday and talking about IP protection. And there was discussion about maybe government providing more funding for IP protection and whether it should be through the universities, whether through third-party organizations like Glyconet or through funding agencies. So this is on the radar. I think they understand that universities have limited funding for IP and they cannot, they will file a provisional patent application, but they will try to license the technology too early or ask somebody to have a startup company. And it's usually putting the company to fail because it's too early, or a company will come and buy the technology and park it, and it's out, right? We cannot use it. So this is one of the things, is how can we ensure that we protect longer our IP, so maybe more funding for IP, and then to make sure that it can be developed further in Canada. So it's part of the sovereignty. And another factor that I was thinking is how can we create an entrepreneurial climate where taking a risk is being encouraged and there's no fear to fail. So this is what is happening in Switzerland. Why they have this such high rate of success? Because for them, failure is not, like you fail, your startup is not working. It's a learning process. It's not a failure. So this is really important. And providing financial incentive for people to take a year off to create their company. So many professors would like to create a company, but they don't. They need the money to live, and they are trying to do both, and it's not good either. So either financial incentive for a trainee to create a company. There are some already, but also professors to have a sabbatical but full salary to create a company, because this is something that we will need if you want to have technologies adopted in Canada and commercialized in Canada. So this is what I'm thinking, that there's some policies that could be changed and focused on this part, more translational.
Volker, anything to add? I think we need to do what Sylvain was talking about this morning. I think we need to show policymakers the value of our MSI facilities. We need to show the impact our MSI facilities have on Canada, what we bring to innovation in this country. We need to think about removing policies that make it difficult for partners to work with our MSI facilities. I think we need to think about IP policies, access to pathogens in our situation, like all those things that make it complicated or difficult for industry to work with our MSI facilities. And we should, in fact, think about whether we, for example, for small biotech or small companies, startups, waive all user fees and make it like an incentive for them to work with us and benefit from the infrastructure that our MSI facilities are offering, rather than charging them money and making it even more difficult for them to really get into the development process.
Yeah, and these are national facilities. I know we've talked about it with vouchers from maybe the local provincial government that might benefit, but definitely federally if there's something out there that might.
Well, even attracting them to where we are, right? Bringing them to Canada. Have startups setting up shop in Canada rather than going somewhere else, and helping them in really growing and becoming a successful enterprise.
But you need the matching 60-40 for us, so it's kind of difficult. So a policy would be the change of matching fund too.
We're really out of time and we almost got through it, but I'll just ask any of the panel if they have 2 or 3 words on the last question. And I know, Francois, you had already mentioned I'd stole your answer. So if you could strengthen one thing, what would it be really?
Yeah, very simple. So I have 3 kids. So whenever they invite their friends at home, I'm always asking, are you aware by science that you could have a job in science? No answer, a part of my kids, because their dad is a scientist. So whatever we want to have funding for activities to be more in contact with high schools and primary schools, well, it's not the responsibility of industry, and then we go to the Ministry of Education. No, this is the responsibility of research. Then we go to the Ministry of Higher Level Education. No, it's basically not the responsibility of anyone. And this really drives me crazy, because if teenagers are not aware of the possibility of science, they will never choose science. It's at the age of 13 and 14 years old where people start to have an interest for something. So if they are not exposed, they will never choose it. So at INRS, we tried this Apprenti Chercheur program. So we bring high school students in the summer. We put them with PhD mentors for 1 week. Okay, we have 20 teenagers coming every summer, but if we could have 200 per year, I will love it. So for me, we need to fix this policy of, different ministries we need to work more coherently all together. Like a laser, coherent.
I'm not going to let anyone speak after that. We need to be more like a lady.
That's a good one.
So thanks very much. I think the next one's actually a Menti. So maybe I think we go to break, right, Sebastian? We could leave that up and the panel will be circulating during the break. If there is the last question was really what did we not ask properly or what did we forget to ask? And really we have the opportunity here to network among us to really try and drive some of that internal MSI collaboration. So thanks very much for your time, everyone. Thank you for the panelists and have a good